There are many places that philanthropy happens. In banks that advise high net worth individuals how to spend their money. In foundations, community foundations, there are multiple forms of organisation, institutional types, that we have already heard about. It's quite multidisciplinary, as you've seen from the previous 4 panels.
When I started the center, I decided that one of the things I wanted to look at was philanthropy outside the United States. And everyone thought I was crazy, although I had read a book on Vox in Turkey and knew that some interesting things were going on. So when I started it, well, Founder took a chance on us, and the Ford Foundation opened its doors to me on 3 continents. I went 1.5 times around the world, to Hong Kong, Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, India, Kenya, Egypt, Greece, Brazil, and Argentina, looking for fellows. And I almost met Alan, who was the field rep down in Nairobi for Ford at that time. So I interviewed over 100 NGO leaders that Ford had identified, and I found 2 candidates. The field has changed a lot since then. We got 16 proposals the first year. Now we sometimes get as many as 600 for 5 or 6 slots. So it's been amazing to watch this kind of critical mass develop around the world. I also have been asked to tell you a little bit about the program. It focuses on community foundations, and as you can see, we've got a really good geographical representation. But we also bring in other fellows who are doing interesting things that can enrich the conversation. It's a leadership training program rather than a nonprofit management program. So it's more like a liberal arts program rather than a technical training program. It's global. The fellows always come in and they think they're going to learn about their country and ours, and we blow that up as quickly as we can, because the most interesting things, the most interesting innovations are coming from outside the United States. So when they go out, they have a global vision. They aren't just expert in American models. A lot of talk has been here too. I've heard a lot of talk here about the need to focus on people, and that's what we do. Sometimes foundations have difficulty deciding about whether to invest in individuals or institutions. Okay, how do I make this go? Oops, a pointer. Could you, which one?
Should go forward.
Okay, great. I'm a techno peasant. You know, I'm an historian. What do you want? So anyway, whoops. Okay, moving right along. There's Marwa. Help. Anyway, can you get it back to the second slide? That went well. Anyway. Oh, goody. Okay, so as you can see, individuals build institutions. And so our fellows have created a whole universe of institutions beyond their own institutional bases. Also, I've heard a lot of talk here and a lot of other places around the world about how, you know, people can be practitioners, or they can be scholars, and what can you do to bring them together? We train scholar practitioners, and I have never believed that the two are mutually exclusive. And if you look at Marwa and if you look at Becky, you see what I mean. And if you're an historian who's running a research center, you're a scholar practitioner. So that's what we aim to do. In terms of the program, very quickly, we only take in about 5 or 6 per cohort. We have a junior fellows and a senior fellows program. One is 1 month, one is 3 months. But we hand tailor the program to what people want to study. They do a graduate seminar with some scholars, but a lot of foundation executives as well. They do peer learning among themselves. We always tell them you'll learn as much from each other as you will from us. And they also have a chance to do peer learnings with the fellows from our network of 218 fellows in 66 countries. So they get a whole array of contacts and a whole array of viewpoints. And for us, we also emphasize that the learning is 2 ways. You know, we learn from them, and that's part of the magic of the program.
I don't think there would be any one place within either social sciences or even in management sciences that if you place philanthropy, everyone will be comfortable in that activity. But what it means is if there are conscious efforts that are made in ensuring that the approaches themselves, the type of questions themselves that we ask, speak to the various aspects of philanthropy. And I'll give an example. I think certain questions that we ask about philanthropy are very sociological. Other questions would be very anthropological. When we try to, the discussions that we had yesterday, for instance, we did the panel on religion and philanthropy. That particular discussion can be a discussion among theologians, but it can also be quite heavily informed by both sociologists and anthropologists. We have a huge presence of economic sciences within the study of philanthropy. Then again, the type of questions that are being asked, what would be, quote unquote, the value of what is happening, the social, the economic transactions that are happening. So that's why we get the discussion, for instance, that Emily quoted figures, for instance, of the diaspora. You can approach that not in terms of what are the social effects, but also probably the volumes of capital that are moving between donors and receivers. There will be questions that are fundamentally within management science. How do we manage the institutions of giving, either as let's say we have intermediate institutions that are used in mobilizing resources, but it's also how probably we might be able to use management sciences in terms of managing or ensuring that we channel a prosocial behavior to one more organized form of giving, for instance. Because from the panels, but also from the discussions that we had from the audience, there are questions regarding horizontal philanthropy, for instance, which is not being given directly to institutions. But there's a lot of giving, probably far much more. I think that McCarthy would argue that it's probably far much more than institutions are giving. So from the management sciences perspective, one may be interested in questions of how can we ensure that some of that form of giving is also quote unquote organized or channeled through formal organization. So, and when you look at all these various types of questions, definitely, I don't think you can have one single form where you would say naturally this is where philanthropy as a discipline would fall.
My name is Awni. I'm with the American University in Cairo, and I'm heading Gerhard Center for Philanthropy, Civic Vision, and Responsible Business. Now, I looked at where in academy is philanthropy placed in maybe a bigger view. When you look at universities, what are the core competencies of universities? The core competency of university is basically to create and disseminate knowledge. Now, when you look at the mission, and I'm gonna sort of go to our school, School of Business, the mission of our School of Business is to create future and responsible, meaningfully, civically engaged business leaders and professionals. Now, when you look at it from this perspective, one of the pillars of the school is responsible business. So we were trying to sort of teach our students, whether through extracurricular activities or through the courses, how do they become responsible business leaders. There is a component of this which is being responsible, and philanthropy is part of it. Now, as a center, we collaborate with different schools So I mean, we are stationed in the School of Business, but we do lots of work with the Global and Public Policy, Global Affairs and Public Policy School, for example. Part of the public policy is they focus on the third sector. We also work with community psychology. Actually, community psychology probably is one of the best schools that are very community engaged in the American university. We also work with people from sociology and anthropology. So there is a multidisciplinarity. Now let's talk about research. When we talk about research in philanthropy, and I'm going to focus on the Gerhard Center, we tend to be more regionally focused. I'll give you an example. A few years back, we've done a research on grant-making foundations in Saudi Arabia. This was in collaboration with King Khalid Foundation. Currently, we're working on trends of philanthropy in the MENA region. It's going to be a book. It will probably be out in 6-7 months. We're talking about a report on philanthropy in Egypt. And we're not looking at it more of a descriptive in terms of descriptive statistics. We're more interested in trends. What's going on? There are lots of foundations in Egypt now that are more interested in impact. And we do lots of programs about social change agents. And again, I'm not trying to create political anarchists, and I'm trying to create here a social change agents. People who actually try to do a positive change in society. How would the community incubate a social innovation? And I'm not talking about somebody from an AUC who's going to come and land with a parachute in a community and tell them the way to salvation. No, I'm talking about somebody from AUC who's going to have humility, who's going to go there and work with them. You're more of a facilitator. They know their problems. Now, when you think you want to have it owned by a community, a natural platform is a community foundation or a community development association, which is part of the infrastructure of a philanthropy. But universities, when they have medical schools, they could do tremendous good neighbor activity. There are examples even in the US. When you look at the University of Pennsylvania, 40 years ago, they were in a terrible neighborhood. And it was improved, and it was improved because of the work of the university. Now, I'm going to conclude with one thing. At the AUC, actually, we do sustainability report. And I'll have to admit, initially, it was very much around environment and carbon footprint. Now, we're pushing hard to sort of push for the social aspects. I mean, as a university, you also have to be a reasonable, inclusive, fair employer to people you hire. You have to have a social mandate of the neighborhood around you, and this has to come in your report. Thank you.
So this is Imhotep Alagided, and I'm a professor of finance here at the Wits Business School. And I also serve as the academic director for the business school. Naturally, our approach has been that of multidisciplinary, as many of you have already said. And I think that as an academy, we have probably emphasized on the issue of disciplinary boundaries. If I go back in time and look at how the academy started, they used not to be disciplinary boundaries. So you just study philosophy, and that's it. Philosophy encompasses almost literally everything. And if you go back to the ancient universities before the rise of the Western model, you could take religious studies, and that could be the fulcrum for all other disciplines. So you emerge as a priest, and the priest served as a medical doctor. He did all the technology and engineering works. But over time, I think we've all been so specialized, and we want to stick to unique disciplinary areas, which is good in one sense, in the sense that it helps one to dig deeper and understand issues in relation to one particular area. But here at the business school, we have a very, very broad view of what an academic discipline should be about. And so when you look at all the programs that we offer here, we attract students from almost all backgrounds. We've got engineering students, economists, sociology, anthropology, and etc. So when the center was set up, it almost became natural that the center has to have an interdisciplinary focus. So at the moment, in addition to this center, we have the Center for Energy Leadership that is interrogating questions about energy efficiency and sustainability and the new forms of energy that would be relevant as we transition from the older and dirty sources. And this directly speaks to the Center on African Philanthropy and Social Investment. The same way, we also have another center called the Center for Digital Business, which is looking at all the revolutions that are happening around artificial intelligence and deploying different types of technologies to speed up transactions and etc. And about 2 weeks ago, Becky and I were at the African Grant Makers of Native Conference, and they were talking about the same thing about the use of cryptocurrencies in facilitating the flow of funds. For instance, how could donors particularly leverage on this part, this type of thing to reach as many people as possible who need funds. So this is an area that is situated within the digital business space, and they're increasingly doing a lot of things on the fourth industrial revolution, data analytics, and etc. All have implications for philanthropy and social investments. And in our programs, we run finance and investment is one of the most popular and highly uptake. It has a very high uptake among students and also academics, and entrepreneurship and innovation. All of these areas I see having direct connection to what we talk about as philanthropy. Now, when you step back a bit and look at some of the questions that we're trying to interrogate at the business school here in respect of the center, you also see that you can't do it in isolation from the other parts of the school, be it the medical school, engineering school, or the School of Computational Science and Mathematics. So some of the issues that came up during yesterday and the previous 2 days when we had the PhD workshop is all about how do we know about the sector that we are in. So the measurement issues, the scale of the flows, and where these flows are directed at. And these are matters that I think the sort of structures and programs that we have here will contribute directly.
My name is Almaz Negash. I'm with the African Diaspora Network. Professor Awni, you mentioned very, very important language in that community-based learning, how you encourage students to go out and work with the community. So I have a question on coordination. McCarthy University, with whom I've worked early on, they got $25 million to coordinate within 21 universities in Africa to take some of their students out to the community, do some work with the community, and come back and create an innovative ways to combat poverty. So that's one, and I'm not sure how well that is coordinated within many of you in Africa, because I think coordination would help reduce silos. The second question I have is turning ideas into action. There's a lot of idea, and one of the greatest challenge we keep hearing when people come to Silicon Valley is we're looking for diaspora to go back and work in Africa because we're having people challenge getting talents that can actually make things happen. I would encourage universities to really, if there is a program, I'd like to know. What are the, two questions. So what are the steps taken, or are there programs that we can actually look into and say, go to this university, go to that university? I really would like to know who is doing what, because that's the one big challenge we have from our end. Thank you.
I'm Jonathan Mokuira, Malawi University of Science and Technology. My question is basically to do with the second part of the theme, setting the agenda. Now, what should African philanthropy be like in 50 years from now? let me put a caveat to this question. How or what steps can we take in order to introduce or bring back or go back to the roots of African philanthropy in schools in Africa? Because we are where we are because of a process. And I'm trying to anticipate here that for the agenda, then we need to go back. And I would like to hear from any of the panelists on this question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Bianca Fadel, PhD student at Northumbria University in the UK. Thank you all for your presentations. And my question is actually about how can we improve the ways we share the knowledge produced in the university level with the communities we actually work with. Because sometimes, I mean, as a PhD student, we know that it's extremely hard to get funding even for field work. And then if we talk about dissemination and feedback into the communities, it's even harder.
Gloria Kafui Bob Miller, PhD student, first year, Wits Business School. My question, just similar to what she just said, but phrased in another form. So 2 questions. 1, how is the center positioning itself in championing the African narrative of philanthropy?
So let me, maybe your point, to the point that there are contradictions and tensions is very right. And I think that if you look at the entire university, any department or faculty that you take this center, you will experience the same kind of contradictions or tensions. I think my point really is that the business school has less of this, not that it doesn't have. We are actually in the space where we could take this and make it work compared to the other parts of the university. And I think the feasibility study was done and we explored the different aspects of it. But beyond that is that we also have a plethora of courses, we call them the Master of Management programs, cutting across entrepreneurship and innovation. We have digital business, we have marketing and sales, we have HR, and etc. So all of these, besides the MBA, which is our flagship program, speak to the needs and the structure and format of the center. So it's really all of this coming together. And then there is the issue of cross-national research agenda, which has been asked. The center has already been set up deliberately to do that. So yesterday we were talking about a student sitting in Makerere being able to apply for research grants here, and you don't need to be necessarily registered at Wits University, but the center can still fund that type of research. And there's also the possibility for academics here to collaborate with other academics in the continent and beyond. So there would be staff-student exchanges, and there would be joint projects that would be funded across different areas of specialization.
I've thought a lot about how people learn, and this idea that you have a curriculum, it shapes people for life, and it's like a sausage factory. They go to the school, they come out as a corporate mold. It doesn't work that way. I mean, we've got a really good curriculum in the fellows program. How do people learn? A site visit, peers, a park bench. That's really depressing. But, that's how Andres began to see philanthropy, to understand it. And I've also been talking to the fellows about what creates a philanthropic entrepreneur. And the definition is that people who can see an opportunity and turn it into a bankable project, so that it may be in a business school, and they may have other business courses, but when it captures the imagination, where the magic comes, the alchemy, can be something entirely unrelated. And the diversity of the offerings that they're going to have at the center, I think, really enhances the possibilities that will happen. Also, in terms of cross-national learning, certainly the center will be doing a lot of that, and they'll be doing convenings, but there are also organizations like iStar, which I'm sure they'll encourage the students to join, which will facilitate that as well.
In many cases, yes, they are guilty as accused, but there is a reformist movement. I'll give you many examples, like Stu Hart, who's the major drive between the BOP Lab network is starting something called SIMBA, which is Social Entrepreneurs MBA in University of Vermont. SIMBA. And you look what they do, they give you 1 semester of coursework, and then you spend the rest of the year on the field, trying to sort of implement what you've learned to create a social innovation that will help a community. I can give you another example. Business and human rights.
We're being a bit time challenged, I just
Okay. Business and human rights is at the University of New York Stern, which is a business. There are many examples where it's always better when it has changed from within, not forced from the outside. The multidisciplinarity is always tricky because universities are very siloed and are very bureaucratic. When you talk about behavioral, this is psychology, and it's getting in everywhere in business. It's easier for business schools to hire a psychologist within rather than to collaborate with the psychology school. So,
yes, there are endowments, especially in South Africa, philanthropic endowments in universities. But this is not necessarily the norm across the continent. I think we've started to see a little bit of that in Kenya. But we need to, as we speak about Africa, I don't think South Africa is necessarily a very good reflection of what is happening elsewhere. But I think the beauty is we can be able to learn about, probably to inform future practices in other parts of the African continent from what's been happening in South Africa.
10:35, sir. Is that okay? Can I ask you to thank the panel? And thank you for some good questioning. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.